On Friday of this week, Presidents Donald Trump of the United States and Putin of Russia are scheduled to meet in Alaska, hopefully to put an end to the proxy Ukraine-Russia war. Now, this creates great consternation for the British in particular, who wanted this war to continue until Russia was destroyed, which, by the way, is not happening. Russia is winning the war, as everyone who is sane knew that they would. There was no other possible outcome. If you know, just look at a map, look at the size of the countries, look at the economies. And NATO has sent Ukraine all kinds of weapons, with the result that over 1 million Ukrainian soldiers have died. The country has been devastated, and its nominal leader, Volodymyr Zelensky, who actually is not the legitimate president, he's overstayed his legitimacy by quite some time. They were supposed to have elections last May, I believe it was, which he canceled. So Russia doesn't see him as the legitimate leader. And frankly, it is the West that has been running this war. So the idea that Putin and Trump would be meeting to end it makes total sense. The British, however, and their European lickspittle allies, particularly Germany, which is saying that they got it wrong in World War II. They should have really killed a lot more Russians. You realize what that's saying. It means they learned nothing from what happened with Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime, and they're looking for a repeat. And that's what you get when you elect a chancellor who was formerly the leader of BlackRock. But that's another story. So the Europeans have been doing everything they can to sabotage this. Now it looks like Zelensky, it may be getting inserted into this thing. Hopefully it's not just for amusing people by playing the piano with his wee-wee, as he was known once to do in an alleged comedy routine, or by sharing bags of cocaine or whatever he would be doing there. Hopefully, frankly, that doesn't occur. It looks like somehow they're going to figure out some way to slip Zelensky into this process. But he really, frankly, shouldn't have any say except to go along with whatever is agreed. If Putin's legitimate security concerns had been heeded by the Biden administration, the British, and NATO back in December of 2021, all of this could have been avoided. And frankly, if President Putin had been listened to seriously back in 2007 at the Munich Security Conference, things might be going entirely differently. So I expect every manner of sabotage, false flag, provocation. It's going to be a very, very fraught 5 days leading into that extremely important summit, which does have the potential to pull us back from the brink. Now, I wanted to share with you a letter, an open letter from Schiller Institute founder Helga Zepp-LaRouche to Presidents Trump and Putin. She writes, "When you are meeting in Alaska on August 15th, the fate of humanity lies in your hands. Against all attempts by the opponents of peace, you can not only bring the war in Ukraine to an end, and with it eliminate the sword of Damocles of the nuclear extinction of the human species, at least over this conflict, but you can also reintroduce diplomacy into the relations of the most powerful nuclear nations on the planet." Imagine that. Diplomacy once again. She says, but there is something even more elevated you can do by not only fighting off the threats facing mankind, but by giving the whole world a beautiful vision for the future. You could agree to build a corridor across the Bering Strait, and with that rail and tunnel project, unite the rail systems of Eurasia with the Americas. And this is what I want to talk to you about, because really this would be a phenomenal win for the United States, for Russia, for the world. It would greatly improve the standard of living by opening up entirely new regions for economic development. And here is the project as outlined by a dear friend of the Schiller Institute, rail expert Hal Cooper, who just passed away a couple years ago. This is his image of what the mouth of the Bering Strait tunnel would look like. This is about 40 miles from Alaska across the Bering Strait into Siberia in Russia. And next here is a slide of Helga Zepp-LaRouche with Hal Cooper at a conference, I believe in 2007, on this topic. So just to get into the details, here it is. You can see this map here. Here is the Bering Strait in the middle, and then look at all the points of rail connection you could have. And these are just some of the big ones, but you see there the Japan being connected, Korea potentially. Look at the United States rail corridors down into California, all the way to Mexico. If we were doing what Elon Musk calls the Hyperloop, but which China is already experimenting on, where you build a tunnel, suck all the air out, and have a vacuum tube, you're now talking about trains that are reaching 600, 700 miles per hour. That's magnetically levitated rail, of course. That's faster than an airplane in many cases. So we'll go to the next slide here. This is a view from the top of the world. So you see the North Pole there, the Atlantic Ocean, and look at that from New York across, actually going up into Canada, and then over across into Alaska, across the Bering Strait. And you could take the train from New York to Paris, also into China. The Chinese very much want this developed. And Siberia is very, very rich in rare earth minerals, precious metals, all kinds of things, which have not really been developed because you don't have this kind of transportation corridor. So I think this is extremely optimistic. And would be of immense benefit to mankind, create millions upon millions of jobs, highly skilled, and raise the standard of living, and also necessitate building a few new cities. And you can imagine younger people being inspired by thinking of designing and planning what a new modern city actually should look like. Would your public transport systems all be underground, or maybe all of your transportation? Maybe the surface would be beautiful parks and museums and opera theaters, and your farms and agriculture centers on the outside. You could have cities with a theme, like Russia has some science cities. You could have a music and culture city, a science city, a writer's city. The potential is really limitless if we're thinking forward. Here is a map as sketched by Hal Cooper of the World Land Bridge. You can see why the British don't like it at all, because it means all of these nations getting their independence and developing. Look at the proposed transcontinental railroads in Africa. Africa to this day still doesn't have a single transcontinental railroad. Now in South America, Brazil and China just signed a memorandum of understanding for the bi-oceanic corridor from the the Pacific, or the Atlantic to the Pacific, if you start in Brazil, over to Peru, where you now have the Shanghai port that China just built. I know it's very hard in the United States, where we're sort of in the middle of this impoverished dark age situation here, that to imagine a world where your children know that their standard of living is going to be higher than yours, that their lives are going to be better than yours, as opposed to the situation now where, as Marjorie Taylor Greene keeps saying about her children, they can't even afford to buy a home. How are you going to have a growing population if nobody can even afford housing in which to raise a family? So the potential, if President Trump wants to truly be great, have something really to be remembered by, why not make an agreement, which actually goes back to the time of Abraham Lincoln, to build the Bering Strait tunnel? This would just be a phenomenal breakthrough for mankind and could usher a new era of peace and economic development.